Elena, the cleaner, laughed scornfully at the boy. Thieves deserve nothing. Jonathan, the millionaire, offered to pay. What he saw in her eyes next froze his very soul, shattering his tranquil world. The crisp autumn air bit at Jonathan Vance's skin as he emerged from the automatic doors of the upscale grocery store, the memory of the scene he had just witnessed still clinging to him like an unwanted shadow. He'd been on his way back from a grueling business trip, his mind already adrift with thoughts of his children, Lily and baby Leo, whom he hadn't seen in far too long. A quiet detour for some fresh produce had turned into an unsettling encounter. There, near the dairy aisle, stood Elena, his seemingly devoted housekeeper. But she wore a different, unfamiliar uniform, a stark contrast to the pristine white she donned at his mansion. Her voice, usually soft and deferential, had been sharp, laced with an unfamiliar venom as she publicly berated a small, trembling boy. The child, no older than 8, clutched a carton of milk, his eyes wide with fear as Elena's words, "Boy kicked out of store by cleaner for stealing milk for baby," echoed from a whispered conversation nearby. Her face, usually so placid, was contorted in a mask of cold fury, a chilling sight that pierced through Jonathan's travel-weary haze. He had intervened, a quiet offer to pay for the milk, a gesture of simple humanity, but it was the flicker in Elena's eyes as she glanced at him, a fleeting moment of calculated malice that had truly ignited a terrifying unease deep within him, a premonition of something profoundly wrong. The sprawling mansion, usually a sanctuary of quiet luxury, felt different as Jonathan's car crunched gravel in the driveway. The silence that greeted him was not peaceful but heavy, almost expectant. The grand foyer, with its polished marble and soaring ceilings, seemed to swallow the sounds of his footsteps, amplifying the growing sense of dread that had been building since the grocery store. He called out for Lily, then for Elena, his voice echoing in the vast space, but only the gentle whir of the central air conditioning responded. His heart, already burdened by the recent loss of his beloved wife during Leo's birth, now thrummed with an unfamiliar anxiety. He had tried to bury his grief in relentless work, building his empire ever higher, believing that providing for his children meant giving them everything material, while unknowingly starving them of his presence and comfort. This emotional distance, a consequence of his own profound sorrow, had left a gaping void, a space that Elena, with her seemingly tireless dedication, had readily filled. He found Lily in her room, a space usually vibrant with toys and childish laughter, now strangely quiet. She sat by the window, her small frame hunched, tracing invisible patterns on the dusty pane. Her usually bright, inquisitive eyes, the very reflection of her mother's, were downcast, shadowed with a sadness that twisted Jonathan's gut. When she finally looked up, her gaze was hollow, a stark contrast to the lively sparkle he remembered. He knelt, opening his arms, but she hesitated, a subtle flinch in her posture before she slowly moved into his embrace. Her hug was weak, her body stiff, not the usual exuberant clasp that used to melt away his stress. As he held her close, a faint, almost imperceptible bruise on baby Leo's arm, which Elena had explained away earlier as a playful bump, suddenly resonated with the cold, unyielding fury he had witnessed in the grocery store. Elena's meticulous plotting, her corrosive resentment for the wealthy, fueled by past injustices and simmering greed, now seemed to solidify into a terrifying pattern, using his vulnerable children as pawns in a game he couldn't yet comprehend. Lily's small voice, barely a whisper, broke the heavy silence, her words a fragile plea that tore at his very being. "Daddy, please don't let her hurt us." The innocent plea, combined with the chilling memory of Elena's public cruelty, shattered Jonathan's world, igniting an unbearable suspicion and a desperate, heart-wrenching quest for truth. The raw, unguarded plea from Lily, a whisper laden with a terror that no child should ever know, ripped through Jonathan's carefully constructed world of grief and ambition. His arms tightened around her small, trembling body, and a wave of profound guilt washed over him, a suffocating realization of his own tragic absence. He had been so consumed by the gaping chasm left by his wife's departure, by the crushing weight of sorrow that had settled deep within his bones after Leo's birth, that he had retreated into the sterile comfort of his work, believing that providing material security was the paramount duty of a father. He had built an empire, amassed a fortune, all while unknowingly allowing the most precious parts of his life to wither in the shadows of his neglect. The vibrant laughter that once filled these halls had slowly faded, replaced by a quietude that he had, in his self-imposed emotional exile, mistakenly interpreted as peaceful. Now, looking into Lily's haunted eyes, he saw not peace, but a silent, desperate cry for help, a truth that struck him with the force of a physical blow. Elena, with her soft-spoken demeanor and perpetually neat uniform, had seemed a godsend in the chaotic aftermath of his wife's death. She was always there, a steady, unobtrusive presence, managing the household with an efficiency that bordered on perfection. She had a way of anticipating needs, of offering comforting words, of presenting an image of unwavering loyalty and genuine affection for the children. Jonathan, blinded by his own sorrow and the sheer exhaustion of navigating single parenthood while running a global enterprise, had seen her as a pillar of support, a benevolent guardian for his vulnerable offspring. He had trusted her implicitly, handing over the reins of his children's daily lives without a second thought, convinced she was a woman of impeccable character. Yet the chilling memory of her face in the grocery store, contorted by that cold, calculating malice, now overlay every past interaction, every seemingly kind gesture with a sinister new interpretation. Her outward devotion was a meticulously crafted facade, a veil woven from years of simmering resentment and a corrosive greed that had roots deeper than Jonathan could yet fathom, perhaps even stretching back to her own untold traumas, twisting her perception of justice and fueling a desire to inflict suffering upon those she deemed undeserving of their privilege. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, now felt like a gilded cage, its spacious rooms echoing with unspoken fears. Jonathan began to observe Elena with a new, unsettling clarity, every movement, every word, now scrutinized through the lens of suspicion. He noticed how Lily would stiffen whenever Elena entered a room, her small shoulders hunching almost imperceptibly, her eyes darting nervously. Baby Leo, usually a cheerful, gurgling infant, would sometimes cry inconsolably when Elena was holding him, only to quiet immediately upon Jonathan's approach. There were other subtler signs, whispers in the wind of something deeply amiss. Doors that were usually open would be inexplicably locked, particularly the children's playroom or Lily's bedroom, with Elena offering a dismissive explanation about keeping things tidy or ensuring the baby's nap was undisturbed. The soft, rhythmic sound of Lily's rocking horse, once a familiar comfort, was absent for long stretches, replaced by an eerie quiet from their wing of the house. He started to find small, unexplained marks on Lily's arms, faint bruises that Elena would attribute to clumsy falls during play, her voice overly sweet, her explanations too readily available. One evening, as Jonathan returned home earlier than expected, he heard a muffled sob emanating from Lily's room. He rushed to the door, only to find it locked from the inside. He knocked gently, calling Lily's name, his heart pounding in his chest. Elena appeared moments later, a placid smile on her face, a laundry basket in her arms. "Oh, Lily is just having a quiet time," she explained, her tone saccharine. "Sometimes children need their space, don't they, Mr. Vance?" She produced a key from her apron pocket, unlocking the door with an almost imperceptible hesitation. Inside, Lily was curled on her bed, her face tear-streaked, but she quickly wiped her eyes, offering a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes when she saw her father. Elena stood in the doorway, her gaze unwavering, a silent warning in her eyes that only Jonathan, now fully alert to the undercurrents of malice, could truly discern. The incident solidified his resolve, transforming his unbearable suspicion into a burning certainty. He knew, with a primal instinct that bypassed all logic, that he had to unmask Elena, not just for his children's safety, but for his own redemption as their protector. His journey had just begun, a desperate, heart-wrenching quest for truth and justice, fueled by a love he had almost forgotten he possessed. The raw, unguarded plea from Lily, a whisper laden with a terror that no child should ever know, ripped through Jonathan's carefully constructed world of grief and ambition. His arms tightened around her small, trembling body, and a wave of profound guilt washed over him, a suffocating realization of his own tragic absence. He'd been so consumed by the gaping chasm left by his wife's departure, by the crushing weight of sorrow that had settled deep within his bones after Leo's birth, that he had retreated into the sterile comfort of his work, believing that providing material security was the paramount duty of a father. He had built an empire, amassed a fortune, all while unknowingly allowing the most precious parts of his life to wither in the shadows of his neglect. The vibrant laughter that once filled these halls had slowly faded, replaced by a quietude that he had, in his self-imposed emotional exile, mistakenly interpreted as peaceful. Now, looking into Lily's haunted eyes, he saw not peace, but a silent, desperate cry for help, a truth that struck him with the force of a physical blow. Elena, with her soft-spoken demeanor and perpetually neat uniform, had seemed a godsend in the chaotic aftermath of his wife's death. She was always there, a steady, unobtrusive presence, managing the household with an efficiency that bordered on perfection. She had a way of anticipating needs, of offering comforting words, of presenting an image of unwavering loyalty and genuine affection for the children. Jonathan, blinded by his own sorrow and the sheer exhaustion of navigating single parenthood while running a global enterprise, had seen her as a pillar of support, a benevolent guardian for his vulnerable offspring. He had trusted her implicitly, handing over the reins of his children's daily lives without a second thought, convinced she was a woman of impeccable character. Yet the chilling memory of her face in the grocery store, contorted by that cold, calculating malice, now overlay every past interaction, every seemingly kind gesture, with a sinister new interpretation. Her outward devotion was a meticulously crafted facade, a veil woven from years of simmering resentment and a corrosive greed that had roots deeper than Jonathan could yet fathom, perhaps even stretching back to her own untold traumas, twisting her perception of justice and fueling a desire to inflict suffering upon those she deemed undeserving of their privilege. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, now felt like a gilded cage, its spacious rooms echoing with unspoken fears. Jonathan began to observe Elena with a new, unsettling clarity, every movement, every word, now scrutinized through the lens of suspicion. He noticed how Lily would stiffen whenever Elena entered a room, her small shoulders hunching almost imperceptibly, her eyes darting nervously. Baby Leo, usually a cheerful, gurgling infant, would sometimes cry inconsolably when Elena was holding him, only to quiet immediately upon Jonathan's approach. There were other subtler signs, whispers in the wind of something deeply amiss. Doors that were usually open would be inexplicably locked, particularly the children's playroom or Lily's bedroom, with Elena offering a dismissive explanation about keeping things tidy or ensuring the baby's nap was undisturbed. The soft, rhythmic sound of Lily's rocking horse, once a familiar comfort, was absent for long stretches, replaced by an eerie quiet from their wing of the house. He started to find small, unexplained marks on Lily's arms, faint bruises that Elena would attribute to clumsy falls during play. Her voice overly sweet, her explanations too readily available. One evening, as Jonathan returned home earlier than expected, he heard a muffled sob emanating from Lily's room. He rushed to the door, only to find it locked from the inside. He knocked gently, calling Lily's name, his heart pounding in his chest. Elena appeared moments later, a placid smile on her face, a laundry basket in her arms. "Oh, Lily is just having a quiet time," she explained, her tone saccharine. "Sometimes children need their space, don't they, Mr. Vance?" She produced a key from her apron pocket, unlocking the door with an almost imperceptible hesitation. Inside, Lily was curled on her bed, her face tear-streaked, but she quickly wiped her eyes, offering a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes when she saw her father. Elena stood in the doorway, her gaze unwavering, a silent warning in her eyes that only Jonathan, now fully alert to the undercurrents of malice, could truly discern. The incident solidified his resolve, transforming his unbearable suspicion into a burning certainty. He knew, with a primal instinct that bypassed all logic, that he had to unmask Elena, not just for his children's safety, but for his own redemption as their protector. His journey had just begun, a desperate, heart-wrenching quest for truth and justice, fueled by a love he had almost forgotten he possessed. Jonathan began his covert investigation, his every action now meticulously calculated, his mind a whirlwind of fear and fierce determination. He started observing Elena's daily routine with an almost scientific precision, noting the times she left the children alone, the moments when her pleasant facade slipped, revealing a flicker of impatience or a hardened stare. He noticed how she would subtly change Lily's clothes before he came home, perhaps to conceal fresh marks, or how she would direct Lily to play in areas of the house where Jonathan rarely ventured. The children's once vibrant personalities seemed to dim further in Elena's presence. Lily retreating into herself, Leo's cries becoming more frequent, more desperate, especially when Elena attempted to soothe him. Jonathan felt a cold dread settle in his stomach, a visceral reaction to the subtle shifts in his children's behavior that he, in his previous grief-stricken blindness, had completely missed. His heart ached with profound regret, a heavy weight pressing down on his chest for the precious time he had lost, for the innocence that had been chipped away under his own roof. One quiet afternoon, while Elena was out running errands, Jonathan found himself drawn to his late wife's study, a room he had barely entered since her departure. He felt a profound connection to her memory there, a lingering sense of her presence among her cherished books and elegant writing desk. He ran his hand over the smooth, cool surface of the mahogany, a wave of bittersweet nostalgia washing over him. It was then that his fingers brushed against a hidden compartment in the desk's underside, a clever design he had forgotten about. Inside, tucked beneath a stack of old letters and photographs, lay a single, carefully folded envelope, addressed to him in his wife's elegant handwriting. His heart hammered against his ribs as he pulled it out, the paper feeling fragile, almost sacred in his hands. It was dated just weeks before Leo's birth, a time when her radiant joy had still mingled with an unspoken anxiety. He unfolded the letter with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the familiar script, each word a whisper from the past. "My dearest Jonathan," it began, a pang of sorrow and longing piercing him. "I write this with a heavy heart, hoping you never have to read it. There are things I've observed about Elena that trouble me deeply. She is not who she seems. There's a coldness in her eyes sometimes, a resentment that frightens me, especially when she thinks no one is watching. She speaks of her own difficult past, of injustices, but with a bitterness that feels dangerous. I caught her once looking through our financial statements, and another time she made a veiled comment about how easily wealth can be lost. Please, my love, if anything ever happens to me, watch over our children. Trust your instincts, not just what you see on the surface. Protect them from anyone who might seek to exploit our family for their own cruel gain." Her words, a haunting premonition from beyond, solidified Jonathan's gravest fears, transforming his certainty into an unshakable resolve. His wife's wisdom, her enduring love, had reached out from the depths of his grief, providing him with the first tangible clue, a powerful testament to the insidious danger lurking within his own home. He would not fail them again. Jonathan's wife's words, a poignant echo from a past filled with both joy and unspoken dread, had pierced through the thick veil of his grief, igniting a firestorm of emotions within him. The raw anguish of her loss mingled with a searing shame for his past blindness, transforming into an unyielding resolve. He held the fragile paper as if it contained the very essence of her spirit, a final, selfless act of protection for their children. The quiet elegance of her script, the careful phrasing, painted a vivid picture of her concern, a mother's instinct sensing the darkness lurking beneath Elena's polished veneer. His mind raced, replaying every subtle glance, every dismissive explanation, every moment of Lily's withdrawn silence and Leo's unexplained tears. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered and meaningless, now clicked into a terrifyingly coherent image, revealing Elena not as a devoted caregiver, but as a predator cloaked in domesticity, meticulously weaving a web of deceit around his most precious treasures. He understood now that her resentment and greed were not mere abstract concepts, but a tangible threat, a corrosive force actively harming his family. His investigation began in earnest, cloaked in a new layer of calculated normalcy. Jonathan became a phantom in his own home, moving with a quiet purpose, his presence a silent challenge to Elena's carefully constructed illusion. He installed discreet surveillance cameras in the children's play areas and in Lily's room, hidden within innocent-looking objects, their tiny lenses capturing the unspoken truths that his grief-addled eyes had missed. He also placed audio recorders, small and imperceptible, in strategic locations, hoping to catch the cruel whispers or harsh tones that Elena reserved for moments when she believed herself unobserved. The first few days yielded little beyond the expected, Elena maintaining her facade of diligent care, her voice saccharine as she spoke to the children, her movements efficient and seemingly gentle. But Jonathan watched, his heart a raw wound, knowing that patience was his most potent weapon. He started spending more time at home, working from his study, making his presence felt, subtly altering the rhythm of the house, hoping to disrupt Elena's routine and force her hand. The shift in Elena's demeanor was subtle at first, a barely perceptible tightening around her eyes, a fleeting stiffness in her posture whenever Jonathan unexpectedly appeared. The children, however, responded with an almost immediate, albeit hesitant, relief. Lily, still guarded, began to seek out his company more often, her small hand finding his with a gentle squeeze that spoke volumes. Leo, too, seemed to sense the change, his cries less frequent, his gurgles of contentment more pronounced when Jonathan held him close. Jonathan made a conscious effort to immerse himself in their lives, reading Lily bedtime stories, playing with Leo on the plush carpet, sharing meals at the grand dining table that had felt so empty for so long. He saw the flicker of hope in Lily's eyes, the tentative blossoms of joy returning to her small face, and his heart swelled with a fierce, protective love, a love he had almost forgotten in his despair. This renewed connection was a stark contrast to the moments he observed Elena through the surveillance feed, moments that solidified his gravest fears into undeniable facts. One afternoon, the cameras captured a chilling scene. Elena, believing Jonathan was still away on a call, stood over Lily, who was struggling with a puzzle. Her voice, usually so soft around him, was sharp, laced with impatience. "You are so slow, Lily. Your mother was much smarter. Why can't you be more like her?" She then snatched a puzzle piece from Lily's trembling fingers, forcing it into place with a rough hand, causing Lily to flinch and tears to well in her eyes, silently accepted, not dared to be shed. Another recording showed Elena denying Lily a snack, Despite the child's hungry plea stating that she needed to learn discipline, her tone cold and unyielding. The most damning evidence, however, came from the baby's room. Elena, frustrated by Leo's persistent crying, had gently placed him in his crib, but then, out of sight of the main camera, she had roughly yanked the blanket over his head, muffling his cries, her face a mask of silent fury before she quickly smoothed her features as she heard Jonathan's footsteps approaching. The faint bruise on Leo's arm, that fleeting mark, now had its terrifying explanation, a silent testament to her cruelty. Beyond the direct abuse, Jonathan also began to uncover the insidious tendrils of Elena's financial manipulations. He noticed discrepancies in the household accounts. Small amounts at first, then larger sums, marked as expenses for supplies or repairs that had never materialized. He cross-referenced receipts, discovering inflated prices and phantom purchases. He also found a series of suspicious transfers from a dormant joint account he shared with his late wife, an account Elena should have had no knowledge of, let alone access to, indicating a deeper, more calculated scheme. It became clear that her greed was not just a passing vice, but a systematic exploitation of his emotional vulnerability and trust, a carefully orchestrated plan to manipulate his wealth. His wife's letter had warned him of her desire to exploit their family for cruel gain, and now, the chilling reality of that prophecy unfolded before his eyes. Elena was not just emotionally abusing his children. She was systematically siphoning off his family's resources, believing herself entitled to what she perceived as their ill-gotten wealth. The mansion, once a symbol of his achievement, felt tainted by her presence, a stage for her cruel machinations. The truth was slowly, painfully coming to light, demanding a confrontation that Jonathan knew would irrevocably change their lives. The chilling reality of Elena's prophecy, woven into his wife's final loving words, spurred Jonathan into a new, relentless phase of his investigation. His grief, once a heavy shroud that had dulled his senses, now transformed into a potent fuel, igniting a fierce, protective fire within him. He was no longer a man lost in sorrow, but a father reborn, every fiber of his being dedicated to safeguarding his children. The surveillance cameras, once just tools for gathering evidence, became extensions of his own vigilant eyes, monitoring Elena's every move, every interaction with Lily and Leo. He spent countless hours reviewing the footage, poring over the captured moments, each one a stark confirmation of the insidious cruelty lurking beneath Elena's carefully constructed facade. He saw her subtle pinches when she thought no one was watching, the harsh whispers she directed at Lily when the child made a mistake, the dismissive shoves she gave Leo when his cries became too persistent. The evidence was overwhelming, a damning testament to a betrayal that cut deeper than any financial theft. Jonathan's presence in the mansion became a constant, unsettling shadow for Elena. He would appear unexpectedly, his gaze unwavering, subtly observing her actions, his silence speaking volumes. Elena, ever perceptive, began to sense the shift in his demeanor, the quiet intensity that had replaced his former emotional distance. Her movements, once fluid and confident, grew slightly hesitant, her smiles a touch too wide, her explanations a fraction too eager. She would often find Jonathan watching her, not with suspicion, but with a profound sadness that seemed to penetrate her carefully built defenses. One evening, as she cleared the dinner table, Jonathan casually mentioned a small discrepancy in the grocery receipts. A minor detail, but enough to make Elena's hand tremble slightly as she stacked the plates. "Oh, Mr. Vance," she replied, her voice maintaining its sweetness. "Sometimes the prices change, you know how it is." But Jonathan noticed the fleeting flicker of unease in her eyes, a crack in her polished armor, confirming that she knew he was watching, that the walls of her deception were beginning to crumble. Driven by an insatiable need to understand the full extent of Elena's betrayal, and perhaps to grasp the twisted roots of her malice, Jonathan discreetly engaged a private investigator. He provided the firm with Elena's full name, her previous addresses, and any scraps of information he could glean from her employment records. The investigator's findings began to trickle in, each piece of information adding a darker hue to the portrait of the woman who had infiltrated his home. Elena, it turned out, had a history of short-term employment, often leaving jobs abruptly after financial irregularities were discovered, though never proven. There were whispers of a difficult childhood, of being abandoned by wealthy relatives, fostering a deep-seated resentment against privilege and a warped sense of entitlement. She had a sister, too, who had struggled with a severe illness, a burden Elena had claimed to bear alone. But the investigator found evidence that Elena had actually siphoned off funds meant for her sister's care, leaving her in dire straits. This new revelation painted a picture of a woman whose greed was not just for personal gain, but fueled by a bitter desire to exact revenge on a world she felt had wronged her, using Jonathan's family as her unwitting instruments of retribution. The subtle confrontations continued, growing bolder on Jonathan's part as his evidence mounted. He started leaving specific documents, seemingly innocuous, in plain sight, Knowing Elena would be unable to resist tampering with them, he replaced the household safe, ensuring that only he knew the new combination, and watched through hidden cameras as Elena, frustrated, tried repeatedly to access the old one, her face contorted in a silent snarl of rage. He observed her growing desperation, the way her cruelty towards the children intensified when she felt her control slipping, her whispers becoming harsher, her physical manipulations more frequent, almost as if she were lashing out in frustration. Lily, though still fragile, had found a new strength in her father's constant presence. She would now sometimes look at Elena with a quiet defiance, her small acts of rebellion, like refusing to eat a meal Elena had prepared, becoming increasingly frequent. One afternoon, Jonathan found Elena in the study, ostensibly dusting, but her gaze was fixed on a stack of legal documents he had deliberately left on his desk. He entered the room silently, his presence making her jump, a nervous tremor running through her. "Elena," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I believe you have something of mine." Her eyes darted to the documents, then back to him, a flicker of panic in their depths. "I don't understand, Mr. Vance," she stammered, her usual composure cracking. He walked over to the desk, picking up a specific financial statement. "This," he continued, indicating a suspicious transfer, "is not where it should be. And neither," he added, his voice dropping to a low, chilling tone, "are some of the other things I've been finding missing from this house." Elena's face paled, her carefully constructed mask finally shattering, revealing the fear and malice that had festered beneath. The air in the room grew heavy with unspoken accusations, the silence between them a tangible battlefield. Jonathan knew then, with absolute certainty, that the time for subtle maneuvers was over. The truth, like a relentless tide, was about to crash down, and Elena, caught in its merciless current, would finally be exposed. The air in the study thickened, heavy with the weight of Jonathan's unspoken accusations and Elena's rapidly crumbling composure. Her eyes, once so adept at conveying warmth and loyalty, now flickered with a raw, desperate fear, quickly overshadowed by a venomous defiance. The polished facade she had so meticulously maintained for months, years even, finally shattered, revealing the bitter, resentful woman beneath. Jonathan watched her, his heart a cold, hard stone in his chest, no longer swayed by the illusion of her subservience. He had seen enough, heard enough, and felt the chilling truth of his wife's premonition reverberate through his very soul. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small, sleek USB drive, placing it deliberately on the desk between them, its presence a silent, undeniable threat. Elena's gaze fixed on it, her breath catching in her throat, a realization dawning in her eyes that transcended mere financial discrepancies. She knew, with terrifying certainty, that her carefully constructed world of deception was about to collapse. Elena's voice, when it came, was a harsh whisper, devoid of its usual saccharine sweetness. "You have no idea what you're doing, Mr. Vance. You don't know what I've been through." Her words, laced with self-pity and a dangerous undercurrent of anger, were an attempt to deflect, to manipulate, to cling to some semblance of control. But Jonathan was no longer the emotionally distant man she had so easily exploited. He had seen the footage, heard the recordings, and the image of Lily's tear-streaked face and Leo's muffled cries burned into his memory. He looked at her, his expression resolute, his voice calm but unwavering. "I know enough, Elena. I know what you've done to my children." The words hung in the air, potent and unforgiving, stripping away any last vestige of her pretense. Her face contorted, a mask of fury replacing the fear. "Children?" she spat, her voice rising, a raw, ugly sound. "You call that caring for children? You were never here. You were too busy with your money, your empire. You left them to me, and you think I should be grateful." The venom in her voice was a stark contrast to the quiet dignity Jonathan now exuded. He felt a profound sense of clarity, the fog of grief finally lifting, revealing the monstrous truth that had taken root in his home. He knew her resentment ran deep, fueled by a lifetime of perceived injustices, but it could not excuse her cruelty. He thought of his wife's letter, her warning about Elena's bitterness and desire to inflict suffering, and he understood that Elena saw his children not as innocent beings but as symbols of the privilege she despised, pawns in her twisted game of retribution. He picked up the USB drive again, his fingers tightening around it. "This contains everything, Elena. Every moment you thought you were alone, every word you whispered, every cruel gesture. It's all here, and my wife, she knew. She warned me. Her memory, her love is protecting them even now." The mention of his wife seemed to strike a nerve, a raw, exposed wound in Elena's own psyche. Her eyes widened, a flash of something akin to terror, mingled with a deeper, more primal rage. She lunged forward, her hand reaching for the USB drive, a desperate, animalistic cry escaping her lips. "You don't understand. You never will." Her movement was swift, unexpected, but Jonathan was quicker. Stepping back, shielding the drive, his body now a barrier between her and his most vital evidence. The brief physical confrontation, devoid of violence but charged with intense emotion, solidified his resolve. There was no reasoning with this woman, no appeal to her conscience. Justice, he knew, had to be formal, absolute, and unyielding. Later that evening, after Elena had been discreetly escorted from the premises by security personnel Jonathan had arranged, a profound quiet settled over the mansion, a silence that felt different from before, lighter, almost cleansing. Jonathan went to Lily's room, finding her curled up with Leo, reading him a picture book, her small voice soft and comforting. She looked up as he entered, her eyes still holding a hint of apprehension, but also a nascent spark of trust. He sat on the edge of her bed, pulling them both into a gentle embrace, a silent promise of unwavering protection. He told her in simple, honest words that Elena would not be coming back, that they were safe now, truly safe. Lily, after a long moment, finally relaxed into his arms, a deep, shuddering sigh escaping her lips. Her small hand reached up, gently touching his cheek. "I knew you would come, Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But her words reverberated through Jonathan's heart, a balm to his wounded soul, a reaffirmation of the power of unconditional love. The next few days were a blur of activity, a whirlwind of legal consultations and official statements. Jonathan meticulously presented the evidence, the surveillance footage, the audio recordings, the detailed financial discrepancies uncovered by his private investigator, and finally his wife's poignant letter, a testament to her enduring love and foresight. The authorities, initially skeptical of the seemingly devoted housekeeper, were left with no doubt as the irrefutable proof unfolded before them. Elena's carefully constructed web of deceit unraveled completely, revealing not just the abuse of the children, but also her systematic theft and manipulation of the Vance family's finances. Her long history of similar exploitations now brought to light by the investigators' thorough work. The picture that emerged was one of calculated malice, fueled by deep-seated resentment and unbridled greed. A woman who had used her position of trust to inflict pain and steal from those she believed had wronged her, or those who simply possessed what she coveted. Jonathan, though exhausted, felt a growing sense of purpose, a renewed connection to his family. His grief now tempered by a fierce determination to ensure that justice would be served, not just for his children but for the memory of his beloved wife. The road ahead was long, fraught with emotional challenges, but he was ready, a father reborn, standing firm as the unwavering protector of his family. The legal machinery, once a distant concept, now churned around Jonathan with an unrelenting force, each gear grinding with the weight of his family's future. He spent countless hours in hushed offices, the scent of old paper and new coffee filling the air, as sharp-minded lawyers meticulously dissected the mountain of evidence he had painstakingly gathered. The surveillance footage, once a secret agony, now played on large screens, its silent frames narrating a chilling tale of betrayal and calculated cruelty. The audio recordings, once mere whispers, now echoed with Elena's harsh tones and Lily's suppressed whimpers, painting an undeniable picture of the abuse. The financial documents, dry and numerical, spoke volumes of her systematic theft, exposing a meticulous web of deceit woven with cynical precision. Jonathan, though emotionally drained, found a surprising strength in this process, a clear, unyielding purpose that had been absent for so long. He was no longer just a grieving widower, but a fierce advocate, his voice steady, his resolve unwavering as he recounted the painful details. Driven by the memory of his wife's premonition and the innocent faces of his children, he understood that this fight was not just about punishing Elena, but about reclaiming his family's peace, about restoring the sanctity of his home, and about honoring the profound love his wife had left behind. Elena, even from a distance, continued her desperate attempts to manipulate the narrative, her every move a testament to her unyielding sense of entitlement and her deep-seated resentment. Through her appointed legal counsel, she vehemently denied all accusations, painting herself as a victim of a wealthy man's grief-fueled paranoia, a loyal employee unjustly targeted. She claimed the financial discrepancies were misunderstandings, the children's withdrawn behavior a natural response to their mother's departure and their father's emotional absence, twisting the truth with a practiced ease that sent shivers down Jonathan's spine. Her lawyers hinted at a countersuit, threatening to expose Jonathan's alleged neglect and his past emotional distance, attempting to shift the blame and muddy the waters of justice. These tactics, designed to sow doubt and instill fear, only fueled Jonathan's resolve. He knew the truth was on his side, etched in the irrefutable evidence, and he would not allow Elena's poisonous narratives to further harm his children or sully the memory of his beloved. He saw her desperation, a cornered animal lashing out, and though it brought a bitter taste to his mouth, it also solidified his conviction that he was doing the right thing, that the path to justice, however arduous, was the only one forward. Amidst the swirling legal storm, the mansion began to breathe again, slowly shedding the oppressive shadow Elena had cast. Lily and Leo, though still bearing the invisible scars of their ordeal, blossomed under Jonathan's renewed and unwavering attention. He filled their days with laughter and gentle routines, making up for lost time with a devotion that warmed his own aching heart. He read Lily's stories every night, tracing the words with his finger as she snuggled close, her small body finally relaxing in his embrace. He taught Leo simple games, delighting in the baby's gurgles and wide-eyed smiles, rediscovering the pure, unadulterated joy of fatherhood. The faint bruise on Leo's arm had long faded, but the memory of it and of Lily's whispered plea served as a constant reminder of the darkness they had escaped. Jonathan, once lost in a labyrinth of grief and work, now found his true north in his children's eyes, their innocent trust a powerful balm to his soul. He learned to bake cookies with Lily, flour dusting their noses, and spent afternoons pushing Leo on the swing set, their giggles echoing through the garden, sounds that had been tragically absent from their lives for too long. The children, in turn, became his quiet allies, their healing a testament to the power of unconditional love. Lily, no longer withdrawn, began to share her fears and her memories of Elena's cruelty. Her words carefully chosen but piercingly honest, adding another layer of heartbreaking truth to the evidence. She spoke of locked doors, of whispered threats, of being told she wasn't smart enough, not pretty enough, not loved enough. Jonathan listened, his heart breaking anew with each revelation, but also swelling with pride at her courage. Leo, too young to speak, communicated his newfound security through his eager stretches towards his father, his contented sighs, and the way his small hand would instinctively reach for Jonathan's, a silent declaration of trust. These moments, quiet and profound, reaffirmed Jonathan's conviction that his fight was righteous, a sacred duty to protect the fragile innocence of his children, and to ensure that no other child would suffer at the hands of someone like Elena. The legal battle loomed, a daunting challenge, but Jonathan faced it with a renewed spirit, his family, once fractured, now steadily knitting itself back together, stronger and more resilient than ever before. He knew the climax would be difficult, emotionally taxing, but he was ready to stand firm, to speak the truth, and to finally bring justice to his children. The anticipation of the courtroom confrontation was palpable. A heavy cloak of expectation draped over their lives, but beneath it a radiant hope flickered, promising a brighter, safer future. The day of the trial arrived, a culmination of Jonathan's relentless pursuit of truth and justice. The courtroom buzzed with an expectant hush, the air thick with tension, as Elena, her face now devoid of its former pleasantries, sat across from them, her eyes narrowed with a lingering, bitter defiance. Jonathan, calm and resolute, presented the irrefutable evidence, the chilling surveillance footage, the audio recordings of Elena's cruel whispers, the meticulous financial ledgers detailing her theft, and his wife's prophetic letter, its words a poignant echo from beyond. Each piece of evidence painted a damning picture, a tapestry of calculated malice and betrayal. Then came Lily, small but incredibly brave, her testimony a quiet, heartbreaking account of fear and isolation, her innocent voice cutting through the sterile courtroom air, leaving no dry eye. She spoke of the locked doors, the hunger, the way Elena would tell her daddy did not love her, words that twisted Jonathan's heart but solidified the judge's grim expression. As the weight of the undeniable truth pressed down, Elena's composure finally shattered. She erupted, a torrent of raw, ugly accusations spilling from her lips, her face contorted in a mask of pure rage and self-pity, blaming Jonathan, blaming the world, confirming for everyone present the depth of her twisted resentment. Her outburst, though shocking, served only to underscore the veracity of the accusations against her, sealing her fate. Justice, swift and unequivocal, followed. Elena's malicious deeds finally brought to light and punished, ensuring she could never harm another child. 2 years later, the sprawling mansion, once a silent testament to Jonathan's grief and Elena's cruelty, now vibrated with a palpable warmth, a symphony of laughter and love. Jonathan, no longer defined by his sorrow, was a hands-on father, his presence a constant, comforting anchor for Lily and Leo. Their days were filled with simple, joyous moments, Lily, now 8, carefully tending to a small rose garden with her father, their hands covered in rich soil, her bright giggles mingling with his contented murmurs. Leo, a boisterous toddler of 3, chased butterflies across the manicured lawn, his infectious squeals of delight filling the air. Family meals were cherished affairs, the long dining table laden with home-cooked dishes, the conversation flowing freely, stories shared and dreams whispered. Jonathan often found himself just watching them, his heart overflowing with a profound gratitude, a quiet joy that had once seemed impossible. The invisible wounds had healed, replaced by an unbreakable bond, a testament to their resilience and the enduring power of unconditional love. The memory of his wife, once a source of aching grief, now felt like a gentle, guiding presence, her love having protected them even in her absence. The story of Jonathan, Lily, and Leo reminds us that even in the darkest shadows, the light of truth and love will always prevail. What would you do to protect a child? How far would you go to mend a broken heart and rebuild a shattered home? Share your thoughts and remember, every child deserves a safe haven, filled with unwavering love and a future built on hope. Let their journey be a beacon, a gentle reminder that evil will be punished, good will be rewarded, and justice is built with truth, courage, and unconditional love, always.